Let me begin with a question. Have you ever been expected to lead with clarity while feeling anything but clear? To reassure others while you yourself were holding uncertainty, fear, or exhaustion? Because that's what crisis does. Crisis doesn't arrive as a neat event. It seeps into decisions, conversations, relationships, and silence. Crisis doesn't reveal new leaders, it reveals the truth of leadership. Welcome to Excellence Foresight. I'm Nancy Nouaimeh. Today, I want to speak to leaders who are navigating disruption, not just in markets and systems, but inside themselves. This episode is about leadership in crisis, and more specifically, about human-centric leadership when it matters most. It's not as a slogan, not as a soft ideal, but as a lived, disciplined practice. Most organizations respond to crisis with structure, and I think we've all experienced this. Plans, scenarios, new governance, tighter controls, and definitely, those things matter. But crisis doesn't move through PowerPoint slides or meetings. It moves through people. It shows up as tension in executive meetings, emotional withdrawal disguised as efficiency, leaders making decisions faster but listening less, teams waiting, watching, sensing instability. All of this is crisis. Before people comply, before they perform, before they align, they feel. They feel fear, they feel uncertainty, they feel loss of control, loss of meaning. And human-centered leadership begins by acknowledging this truth, this very truth, without trying to immediately fix it. Because the moment leaders deny the emotional reality of crisis, they create fragmentation. And fragmentation is more dangerous than uncertainty. We all focus on uncertainty when we talk about crisis. In crisis, leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about having the presence to name what's real. And naming reality is not weakness. We all believe sometimes it's a weakness. It is what I call leadership. And now let's talk about something we rarely speak about openly, the inner experience of the leader during crisis. This is something that we rarely discuss. Because while organizations look to leaders for certainty, leaders are often carrying much more than that in crisis. They carry the fear of making irreversible decisions, the weight of people's livelihoods, the pressure to appear calm, confident, and composed, and this is what we all expect from them, and also the loneliness of responsibility. And I hear many leaders tell me, I can't show doubt, I can't afford to be vulnerable. They expect me to be strong. So leaders hold it all inside. And I've experienced this as a leader. But here's the paradox. What leaders suppress internally, the organization absorbs collectively. And if a leader is disconnected from the values, the emotions, the limits, the humanity, that disconnection does not remain private. It shows. And organizations, they don't feel what leaders say, they feel who leaders are. This is why resilience is so often misunderstood in organizations. And to me, resilience is not endurance, is not pushing through, is not emotional suppression. Resilience is really about integration. A human-centric leader in crisis should pause before reacting, should listen without preparing a defense, should regulate himself before regulating others, should notice his own nervous system under pressure. This is not softness. Please don't mistake that to softness. This is discipline at the human level. Now, there's a reality in crisis which we should really not ignore. Leadership does not switch off at the end of the workday. Stress travels home with us. Moral dilemma follows leaders into the evening. How many times we saw decisions replay themselves at 2 a.m. in the morning? And yet, many systems still operate as if leaders are machines, available, responsive, endlessly resilient, but we're not machines. We ask leaders to be human at work, while designing lives that strip humanity away. Human-centric leadership means recognizing these four things: that energy matters more than hours, clarity requires rest, boundaries are not disengagement, sustainability is a leadership responsibility. And when leaders model healthy limits, they don't weaken culture. At the contrary, they humanize it. And when leaders are allowed to be whole humans, they create environments where others feel safe enough to think, speak, and contribute fully. And this is what we want to have. And it's important to understand that trust survives crisis not because leaders are perfect, but because they are credible as humans. Let me share a story from a chapter in my career that shaped how I think about leadership. I was working on a mega project, high stakes, tight timelines, constant pressure. On paper, everything looked fine. Strong structure, clear objectives, but behind the scenes, the stress was real. What made the difference was the team. I had a genuinely good team, capable, committed, professional. But what many people don't see on projects like this is how pressure travels. Stress rarely stays at the top, it cascades. It cascades down in meetings, into deadlines, into tone, into people. And I had seen that happen before. Previous leaders on that same project had let the pressure roll downhill, and the team felt it. So I made a conscious decision. No matter how intense things got above me, I would not pass stress on to my people. That didn't make the pressure disappear, it meant I carried more of it myself. There were days I felt it, mentally, emotionally, but I kept the space around the team steady. Clear direction, respectful conversations, focus on progress, not panic. Now, here's the part that surprised me. The team really noticed it. They saw when I was under pressure, not because I said it, but because leadership shows up in energy, not words. And instead of fear, they responded with understanding. So that they stayed positive, they kept going, they supported each other, and definitely they supported me. That's when I realized something important. When people feel protected, they don't shut down, they step up. Leadership isn't about being unbreakable. I was breakable at that time. It's about being responsible with the weight you carry. Sometimes that means being the buffer. Sometimes it means absorbing pressure so others can do their best work. And trust me, teams know the difference. When stress is pushed onto the team, it creates fear. When stress is managed above them, it creates loyalty. That project taught me that strength in leadership isn't loud, it's steady. And when you create that steadiness, even under extreme pressure, your team doesn't just deliver, they stand with you. And that's something no project plan can ever fully capture. I want to go back a little bit to our Excellence Foresight podcast. And we know crisis creates urgency. And urgency tempts leaders into one of two paths. The first is either to react, tighten control, reduce dialogue, speed without sense making. And the second is foresight. So we move from reaction to foresight. Foresight leadership doesn't rush to answers, it pauses to see patterns, it listens beneath the noise, it stays anchored in purpose when pressure rises. Human centricity is what enables foresight. Because foresight is not about prediction, as we tend to believe that, it's about perception. Leaders who stay human can sense early signs of burnout, unspoken resistance, cultural fractures before they break, weak signals before they become crises. What we sense early, we don't pay for later. So that's why it's very important to move from reaction to foresight. But there's one more dimension we need to talk about here today. Because leadership in crisis isn't only about responding well, it's about preparing differently for the future. It's about resilience. And resilience is often framed as recovery, as getting back to where we were. But the future doesn't reward those who return to the past. True resilience is not about bouncing back, it's about adapting forward. Human-centric leaders don't prepare for the future by trying to predict every disruption. We cannot do that. They prepare by building human capacity. That's what we need to do as leaders. That's what we need to focus on. And capacity to what? Capacity to think systemically, to stay grounded under pressure, to engage in difficult conversation when there's a need to do that, learn faster than circumstances change, and restore meaning, not just performance. So organizations that invest only in robust processes but neglect the emotional and cognitive resilience of leaders may seem stable, just only until the next disruption. The future is not shaped by the strongest systems, it's shaped by the most adaptable humans within them. And that's what we need to keep in mind. And that is something that's going to make the big difference. And now, as we come to the end of this episode, let me leave you with three takeaways. The first one, crisis tests the inner architecture of the leader. And I like to call it inner architecture. This is who the leaders are. If the inner system collapses, the outer systems follows. Leaders need to be grounded in their values. And this inner architecture doesn't only help leaders endure crisis, it determines how ready they are for what comes next. And resilience begins inside. My second takeaway today: human centricity is not a nice to have. It's not. It's a strategic capability. In times of uncertainty, organizations don't fail because strategy is missing. They fail because human capacity is depleted. Human-centric leadership builds resilience by design. That's future readiness. And I think we need to really think deeper as leaders, intentionally. What can we design and how can we design the capabilities for the future? The third takeaway: foresight emerges when leaders stay human. This is my ask for all of you. Disconnected leaders, they react. Human leaders, they perceive. And perceptive leaders shape the future. And resilience is what allows foresight to exist under pressure. Not prediction, but presence. And I would like to bring here the principle of the Shingo model and the Shingo guiding principles. Lead with humility. Leaders need to be present to be able to predict and perceive. So I'll leave you with one final question here today. Where in your leadership does humanity need to be restored before strategy can truly succeed? This is Nancy Nouaimeh, and this was Excellence Foresight. Stay tuned for our next episodes. We're bringing a brand new series straight to our listeners. Until next time, lead from within, especially when it's hardest. Thank you for tuning in.